Learn while loops in JavaScript. We will begin with a basic example. I have written a while loop, and right now in the console we might see numbers from 1 to 9. Now let's reproduce that output by hand. I will comment out our previous while loop. Right now we have a clear console. I start from the same variable number, then I console.log this value and increase it by 1. Then I will just copy and paste last 2 lines. Right now you see that we have 1 and 2, and I might just continue to copy and paste them until I reach number 9. Now we have the program that does absolutely the same thing as our while loop, but you see how simpler is this code that contains just 5 lines comparing to this code that contains 19 lines. Once you find yourself copying and pasting the same part of the code, you can use while loop to avoid repetitions. I want to demonstrate you one problem you might encounter in the future. If I will save this file, you will see that my console will be bombed with messages, and in this case I will just close the page. So I save the file. We see a lot of messages. Okay, and I closed my page. Then I need to add a keyword break and connect to my browser again. We see that we have only one number, so this condition that we had calls an infinite loop. I have demonstrated this problem because at the first time it might be very scary, and right now you know that you need to close the page or you might close the browser. If your computer doesn't respond, you might turn off the computer. But generally, you can just close the page, it will be enough. Let's break the while loop down and compare it to if statements. I comment out this while loop, and now we can see the messages only from the if statement. What does the if statement do? If this condition is true, it goes inside of our curly braces, so this part calls body, and it executes our body. Then it goes to the next section, and this is the reason why if this condition is true, we have the message, and then we have the message about the next section. Now let's compare it to the while loop. While loop has another keyword. Instead of if, we write while. Then it has absolutely the same condition in the parentheses, and this condition also might be true or false. If this condition is true, it goes inside of our body, executes this code, and then check the condition again. And if this condition is still true, it will execute our body again. To better understand the difference between while loop and if statements, let's look at this diagram. If the condition of if statement or while loop is false, they behave in the same way. They just skip the body and go to the next section. I might write 100 right here, and the same I will do with while loop. Right now the condition inside of our if statement equals to false, and the same condition we have inside of our while loop. If I save the file, we'll see just messages about the next section. So while loop block section and if statement block section have been skipped. This is what I mean when I say that they skip the body. If the condition inside of the while loop or if statement is true, the first step is the same. They execute the code inside of the body, but then they behave in a different way. If statement just go to the next section, but while loop check the condition again, and if this statement is true, it returns back and start the loop again. And we might exit the body, exit the while loop only if the condition equals to false. In this example, if I change back the score to 0 and save the file, we see that 0 is less than 10, so this condition is true. Then it executes the body where it increases the score by 1 and show it in the console. Then it will go back to check the condition. So right now our score equals to 1. 1 is again less than 10, so this condition is again true. It will go again to execute this code, and at the point when score is equal to 10, this condition will be false and our while loop will be skipped, and we will go to the code section immediately. Here is another example. I will start from the keyword let and write a variable for string. And let's assign an empty string. So this is our variable, and right now let's write a while loop. I start from the keyword while, then I put parentheses, And inside of the parenthesis, I should write the condition, the same as in if statements. I might write that string.length is less than 5. Then I must put curly braces. And right now I might write some body, but our body must influence the condition because otherwise we'll have an infinite loop. So first thing that we should change is actually string length. Right now it's equal to 0 because we don't have any characters. Let's add new characters to our string. For example, we might add a letter to our string, and let's also console.log the value. Now, if I save the file, we see that we have a that increases to 5a in a row. So our loop works correctly. We might add if statements inside of our while loop. So let's write something like if string.length is more than 3, we will assign another letter to the string. So now I might save the file and we'll see another messages. And now I might play with that. For example, change the length to 10 and we will see interesting messages in the console. So you might play with that to better understand how while loop works. I will give you a code challenge. Try to solve it by your own. In the code challenge, you will have two variables, word and speed. The initial value of word is equal to an empty string, and the initial value of speed is equal to 0. If our word's length is less than 4, you should add a letter to the word. And if the word's length is more or equal to 4, you should increase the speed by 2. And all this part should be inside of the while loop, and you should exit the while loop if the speed is more than 5. So, and then you should write the message that all cycles have finished. Pause the video if you want to solve it by your own, but right now let's solve it together. I should start from the two variables, word and speed. So I will write let word equal to an empty string. And also I will write let speed equal to 0. Then I should start a while loop. So I will start from the keyword while. Then I have parentheses, and inside of the parentheses I should write the condition when we should execute our body in the loop. In our case, we see a message that if our speed is more than 5, we should finish the loop. So it means that if our speed is less or equal to 5, we should execute the body of our loop. I wrote that speed is less or equal to 5 and then goes curly braces. And inside of the curly braces, we write our body. So we have two different conditions. If our word length is less than 4, add a letter to a word. Let's write an if statement where the condition is word length is less than 4. And we should add a letter to the word. So let's write word equal word plus a. And then we have the second if statement that if word length is more or equal to 4, increase the speed by 2. I might write a new if statement, and then I might increase the speed by 2 inside of this if statement. But you also might notice that we can simplify it because we have two opposite conditions. Our first condition is word length is less than 4, and our opposite condition is word length is more or equal to 4. So instead of the second if statement, I might write else statement. And here I will have the same body that speed is equal speed plus 2. If it's easier for you to write two different if statements, it's totally fine, and you might solve this code challenge by two different if statements. If you understand why these conditions might be simplified with if-else statement, you might solve it with if-else statement. And before I save the file, let's have a look that inside of our body, we have a statement that influences our condition. In this case, we have speed that might be increased by 2. And if we'll increase it 3 times, we'll have a number of 6 that is more than 5. So this statement will be false and we'll go out of our while loop. When we exit our while loop, we should write a message that all cycles have finished. Let's write this message. And right now let's save the file and see how it works in the console. I saved the file and I see that I haven't consoled our values, so we don't have any changes. So let's add to console logs. In our first if statement, I will console.log our word, and in our else statement, I will console.log the speed. Right now, if I save the file, we see that our loop works as expected. We add a letter A to the word, then console this word, so we have A. Then we start again. Our word length is still less than 4, so we add a new letter A, and we continue to do it until our word length is equal to 4. And then we'll start to execute the else statement where we increase our speed by 2 and console it. We started from 0, then we sum 2 and our speed variable has the value of 2. We console this, then we do it again, we have number 4, then we do it again, we have number 6, and when our speed is equal to 6, our while condition is equals to false because our speed is not less or equal to 5. And we have the final message that all cycles have finished. The first challenge demonstrates a common way of using loops. Write the program that calculates the sum between all numbers from 1 to 100. The correct answer should be 550. Pause the video to solve this code challenge by your own, but right now let's solve it together. I know that we must use a while loop for this code challenge, so I might start from the keyword while. Then we have a parenthesis, and inside of this parenthesis we might write any condition that equals to true or false. So the same conditions as in if statements. So let's think when our loop should work. It basically should sum all the numbers until we reach the number of 100. And as our 100 number is including, we actually should finish our while loop if our number is 101. So I might write something like counter is less than 101. While this condition is true, our while loop continued to execute the body. At this point, I will add break keyword immediately to prevent accidentally creating an infinite loop. So I write a word break. Right now, I might save this file, but as you see, we haven't initialized our counter. So let's write let counter equal to 1. We should start our calculation from the number of 1. This is the reason why the initial value of our counter is equal to 1. I should also store the result somewhere. So I might create a new variable total to store our answer. I will write let total equal to 0. Here is the initial value is 0. So in the body, I might write total equals to total plus counter to constantly increase the value of total by counter. In this case, after each iteration, we will add the counter to the total until the counter reaches the number of 101, which means that we should exit the while loop. Right now we change our total variable, but we don't change our counter. So it means that this loop will work infinitely. Let's also change our counter. So right now our counter will be incremented by 1 after every iteration. So let's calculate the results of our body to better understand how it works. At the beginning we have counter that equals to 1 and totals that equals to 0. And then in the body we should add total that equals to 0 plus counter that equals to 1. So our total will be 0 plus 1. And then our counter takes our counter value, that is 1, and then add a constant of 1. And our new counter will be 1 plus 1. For the second iteration, we take these values of total that equals to 1, and we also take the counter that equals to 2, and then we do the same stuff, so we goes by the same formula. We take total that equals to 1 and sum the counter that equals to 2. So our new total equals 1 plus 2. The same with our counter. We take the counter that equals to 2 and constantly add 1. So our new counter is equals 2 plus 1. Then we take these numbers for our third cycle and we do the same stuff again. So we take the total and sum the counter, and this is our new total. And then we take the counter and sum 1, and this is our new counter. And this process goes constantly until the counter reaches the number 101. Because at this point, this statement will equal to false and our while loop will be finished. Let's delete the keyword break and console.log the result of total to see the result in the console. If I save the file, we see that our value is equal to 5015. That is the right answer. There are actually many ways how to solve this challenge. For example, we might start from the counter of 0, and we might start from the line that increments the counter by 1, and then the line that adds the counter to the total. So this is one of the possible solutions, and we see that this line also gives the 550 to the console. And there are also one interesting solution that might be easier for beginners, but it requires more lines. So basically, we use a variable works for our while loop that stores the value of true or false. And then we assign a value of false if our number equals to 100. In this solution, as you see, we also print every single iteration to the console, and we might see how our numbers are changing during the iterations. Any of these solutions are right, write this one that is simpler for you. The second challenge is love letter. You start from the two variables, letter and counter. Then you have two different phases. One phase is a rising phase and the second one is a falling phase. During the rising phase, you constantly increment the counter by 1. So it starts from 0 and go until the number of 5. So it goes 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And during each iteration, you should write a word darling to the letter. When the counter reaches the number of 5, it should switch the phase to the falling one. Falling phase starts from the number of 5 and then it decrements the number by 1 every single iteration until it reaches the number of -5. So it will go from 5 to 4, 3, 2, 1, 0, -1 and so on until it reaches the number of -5. And every single iteration at falling phase, you should add the word love to the letter. I will give you one clue that you might use several while loops for this challenge. So right now, pause this video if you want to solve this challenge by your own, but right now let's solve it together. I know that I must use the while loop, so I start from the keyword while. Then we have parentheses, and let's think what condition we might write in this parenthesis. So let's assume that our first while loop belongs to the rising phase. It should run the code. It should run the body until our counter reaches the number of 5. So I might write something like counter is less than 5. Actually, you might write something like counter is less or equal to 5, or even counter is less than 6. Here is not specified what you must do when the counter reaches the 5. So we don't know, should we add a new word darling to our letter, or should we immediately change the phase to the falling one, and maybe we need to add a word love. So write this condition that is more logical for you. I think that for me the simplest one will be less than 5. So I use counter in the parentheses, then I will start my body from the keyword break. Now you see that I'm using the counter, so I should initialize the counter. So we see that our counter equals to 0. This we have in our assignment. We also have another variable letter that equals to an empty string. So let's initialize it as well. Now we have two variables and we might think about our body. Until we reach the number of 5, we should add a word darling to our letter. I will write that letter equals to letter plus darling. And we should also increase the counter because we use it in our condition. In order to prevent an infinite loop, we will increment it in our body. Right now I see that I increase our counter and at some point it will reach the number that is higher than 5. I know that we will have an exit condition, and this is the reason why I might delete our keyword break and log the result to the console. If I save the file, right now we see a lot of word darling. I might also add a white space after our darling word. And right now, if I save the file, we will see 5 times the word darling separated by space. Our rising phase works correctly. Let's start from our falling phase. So I will start from another while loop. Again, we have the parenthesis. Let's think about the condition that we should write there. So our falling phase goes until our counter reaches the number of -5. So I might write that counter is more than -5. Then I will start the body from the keyword break. And now let's think what we should add in our body. Instead of the word darling, we should write a word love. So let's write the same line as we have right here, but instead of the darling, we'll use the word love. And we also should decrement our counter by 1. Right now, I will delete a keyword break and I will log the result to the console. If I save the file, we see 2 messages. Our first letter is after the first while loop. Here we have 5 times word darling. And our second letter is our final letter, where we have words darling and words love. Our last challenge for today is a printing machine. We need a message with 5 letters. So ask a user to write a message. So you have a while loop, and while our message length is less than 6, you should constantly ask a user for writing a letter. For this purpose, use a confirm function. If you don't know how confirm function works, I have a video with a JavaScript game project where I explained how it works. As we know, in the confirm function, the user has 2 choices. He might press OK, and in this case, we will add a letter to the message. Or he can press a cancel. If the user presses cancel, switch the letter from A to B or from B to A. So the user has only 2 options. He might write a letter that is chosen right now, or he might switch the letter. So I think that we might start from the variable message. And our message equals to an empty string. And then we might write a keyword while. I recommend to immediately add a keyword break to prevent an infinite loop. In the parenthesis, we must write a condition that keeps our loop running. In our case, this is message length is less than 6. And first thing that we can do in our body is actually ask a user to write a letter. So let's start from the confirm function. At first, I might ask a user to write a message. Then I will use the symbol to separate lines. This symbol works as pressing enter on the keyboard. And then we might add some instructions. For example, OK means add the current letter. And cancel means switch the letter. And we also might display the current letter. For that, I might use a concatenation. It uses the same sign as addition, but it calls concatenation when we sum 2 strings. So when we join them together. And right here, let's join current letter. So we don't have this variable and we must initialize it. In our description, we have that default is A, so I might immediately give the value of A to the current letter. And it should work that it will take this variable, replace with the value, so in our case this is A, and when we have the concatenation between 2 strings, it will join them together, and we will eventually have a 1 string. This is our final message that we should have as a result of this function. I will undo our changes by Ctrl+Z. And then I will open the console in the browser using Live Server extension. And right now we see a pop-up message as expected. So I might press OK. And then I will press Alt-Z to wrap the code. And right now we see that our 14th line is separated into 3 lines. But if I expand this window, we see that this is still a 1 line. And of course we might separate this message into several confirm functions, but it depends on your choice. We should think about our exit condition. We must add the current letter to the message 5 times to finish the loop. Let's write that message equal to message plus current letter. But we also should check that the user presses OK to add the letter to the message. We can add an if statement. And inside of the if statement, I might write that if the user choice equal to true, so then we add a letter to the message. We don't have the user choice variable, so we should initialize it. Our user choice is a confirm function that returns only true or false values. If the user choice equal to true, we add the current letter to the message, and if it equals to false, we should switch the letter. I will write just else letter equal to B. So right now, if user presses OK, it gives the true value as a result, and we will increase the message length. So we have an exit condition, and this is why I can delete the keyword break and test this code in our browser. If I press cancel, we see that current letter have been changed to B, and then if I press cancel again, we'll see absolutely the same message. So I can toggle it back to A, but if I press OK, I should actually press it 5 times to exit the loop. Right now we have finished our loop. Let's add console.log to better see the changes. At the end of the file, I will add just console.log. I will log our variable message. Let's inspect the page. And right here we will choose a console. And now I might save this file. And we see that our current letter is A. If I press OK, it adds a letter A to the message. And if I press cancel, it switches the letter. The console shows number 2 next to the double A because we console our message every cycle. And when I press cancel, this is the action of switching the letter, and it takes 1 cycle. Every time when I press some button, I have a new message in the console, and I might do it until I reach the number of 5. Right here I see that it actually finishes our loop when our message is equal to 6. So let's change this number to 5. And then I will test it again. And right now it works as expected. Let's add this last mechanic of switching the letters from A to B and from B to A. We switch the letter in this else statement. And right here I should check what is the current letter. So if it equal to A, we should assign a new value of B. And if the current letter equals to B, we should assign the value to A. As I have only 2 possible variables right here, my current letter might be A or my current letter might be B, I will write it as if-else statement. Right now I might test this file, and if I press cancel, it switches the letter to B. I might press cancel again. It switches the letter back to A, so it worked as expected. And right now I might write a message using only 2 buttons. So basically I might press OK to add the current letter to the message, and I might press cancel to switch the letter, and this is our final result. Now let's use new skills to refactor our game project. If you don't have this project for any reasons, you can download it from my GitHub. To download the file, open the link in the description, then find a Buckshot Roulette.js file and click it, and then click the download button in the right top corner. Then you can open this file and you might work in this file, but I will copy and paste this file to a new JS file. So I will press Ctrl A to select all the code. then Ctrl C to copy it, and then I will go to the new JS file and press Ctrl V to paste it. And to see the changes in the console, I should go to our HTML file and change the source to GameRefactor.js. This is the name of our new JS file where we will work. So if you want to work in the Buckshot Roulette.js file, you should choose a Buckshot Roulette.js file right here. Now, if I save the file, we see our game in the console. As you remember, we might press OK in order to shoot the dealer, or we might press cancel to shoot ourselves. And this is basically how we played this game. I expand the window to better see what happens, and notice one interesting thing, that the second cycle and the first cycle are identical. If we want to add more cycles, we basically copy the last cycle and then paste it to create a new cycle. But we might use while loop to actually have as many cycles as we need. I see that my first cycle and second cycle are a little bit different. The second cycle has 2 additional lines. I should add them in the first cycle. I will copy and paste them, and I will delete this space. Our first cycle and our second cycle are identical, but we have one problem, that basically we have both these lines above when we initialize all the variables. So right now we should initialize these variables without any values. So I might just delete all this code above. And right now you see that both these variables are empty, and this is exactly what we need, because we added these lines into our first loop. To better understand how to modify our code with while loop, I start to write it a little bit above. When we start writing the while loop, we start from the keyword while. I write this keyword. Then we have parentheses. Inside of the parentheses, we should write the condition that keeps our while loop running. We want to run a new cycle if player's lives is more than 0 and if dealer's lives is more than 0. So the condition is absolutely the same as in our if statement. Then we have parentheses, and inside of the parentheses, we are using the body. Our body is the same as our body of the if statement. If I copy and paste them, right now we might compare both these statements, and we see that they're different only in this keyword while. What I actually can do, I will delete this block that we have written, and then I will just change the if keyword to while. And right now it means that while our player lives more than 0 and dealer lives more than 0, we will generate a new cycle. This is exactly what we did when we copied and pasted our cycles. So right now I might delete the second and the first cycles. Right now you see that we have a game loop, so I might delete this label of first cycle. Then we have a winning check, and winning check happens only if we exit our while loop. And we exit our while loop if dealer's lives is 0 or if player's lives is 0. And then look that we have a default condition that can't running right now, because our while loop will generate as many cycles as we need to kill the player or to kill the dealer. So I can delete a default condition as well. And basically, this is the end of our refactoring. So let's save this file and test how it works. I save the file and I see the same message as previously. If I press cancel to shoot myself, we might lose a life or we might gain a life. So I will press it again, and you see that lucky break. Right now I have gained my life. So both these conditions works correctly. And let's press OK. And I might also lose a life, or I might shoot the dealer and the dealer might lose a life. So let's try to press OK again. Unfortunately, we have lost 2 lives. So let's play this game again. I refreshed the page. Right now I will try to shoot the dealer, and you see that you hit the dealer, and I will try to shoot the dealer again, and you see that, yeah, it works. So we might shoot the dealer 2 times, and you might test it as many times as you want, and you will find that this code works absolutely the same as our previous code. Learn increment techniques in JavaScript. With an understanding of loops, we started to increment our variables quite often. Right here I have a simple example of increment techniques. I declare a variable counter with initial value of 0, and then until our counter reaches the number of 10, I increment counter by 1 and log the results in the console. And in the console, we have several logs from cycle 1 to cycle 10. But in JavaScript, we have shorthands that are extremely common. Let's assume that I have a variable of counter and I need to increase it by 5. I can achieve that with a line like counter equal counter plus 5. But I also have a shorthand for the same code, which is counter plus equal 5. Both these lines do absolutely the same thing, and the upper one is a shorthand. But that's not the end. Have a look at another example. Now we have a counter and we want to increase it by 1. We can use the first method, which is counter equal counter plus 1, or we can use the second method, which is counter plus equal 1. But this situation in JavaScript, when we need to increase a counter by 1, is so common that we have the third method, and our third method is counter plus plus. All these three line of codes do absolutely the same thing. They increment the counter by 1 and save the result in the counter. But we also can do the same thing with decrementation. In order to decrease the counter by 5 every cycle, we just need to replace the plus sign to a minus sign. And the same thing in the second method. We just replace plus equal sign to minus equal sign. And the same if we need to decrement the counter by 1. So we can use counter minus minus instead of the counter plus plus. Let's try to do the same thing in the code. As I said, I can replace this line of counter equal to counter plus 1 to something like counter plus equal 1. And if I save the file, we see absolutely the same result in the console. I might change this number to something like 2, because we remember that the second method works with all the range of numbers. Instead of 1, we can use 2 or 10 or whatever number you want. So if I save the file, now we see only even numbers in the console. Let's also try to use counter plus plus. And if I save the file, you see that we have absolutely the same outcome that we had before. And once you get used to, you will find that it's much more easier to write and to read. And you will want to use counter plus plus instead of counter equal counter plus 1. And let's also test the decrementation. So I change our initial value to 10. And I changed the condition to counter is more than 0. In this case, we might use counter minus minus, and I save the file, and right now you see that we have cycle 9 to cycle 0. And for example, I might also try counter minus equal 1, and we have the same result. Or I can change this number to 2, and right now you see only even numbers in the console. Today you will learn about for loops in JavaScript. For loops are the most common type of loops, even though they might look very scary at first. The best way to get used to them is through practice. So let's try to solve the same challenges as we had for the while loop, but at this time using for loops. In the first challenge, we need to sum all numbers from 1 to 100. On the right side, I have a while loop solution that we made in the video about while loops. But right now, on the left side, I will solve the same challenge using for loops. At first, I'm using for keyword. Then I have parentheses. The part inside of the parentheses is split into 3 different parts. Let's have a look at the middle part of the for loop. We can find that this part is absolutely the same as we had in the for loop. So the middle part determines while our loop should work. Then if we look at the while loop, we see that we initialized our number before the loop. But in the for loop, we have the first part where we can initialize our variable. And the third part of the for loop is the last action in our cycle. So after the cycle, we should increase the number by 1. We have the same line in the while loop, but it is written in the body of while loop. And then if I want to sum all numbers from 1 to 100, I also need a variable that will store my answer. So I will initialize the total. And in the body, I will write absolutely the same line that we had in our for loop. So total equals total plus number. And let's also log the result to the console. And now in the console, we might see the answer 5015. That is the right answer. Now I will change number to a new variable I. I stands for index, and this is the most common name that we are using in the for loop. And instead of the line total equal total plus I will use a shorthand. Total plus equal I. If these shorthands as plus plus and plus equal are new for you, I have a video on this topic. Let's practice more to get comfortable with for loops. In this challenge we have two phases. So in the rising phase, while our counter moving or changing from 0 to 5, we should add the word darling to our letter. And in the falling phase, when our counter changing from 5 to -5, we should add the word love to our letter. Let's start from the rising phase. I'm starting from the variable letter that equals to an empty string. And then I will write a for loop. So I'm starting from the keyword for. Then I should initialize our variable. Generally, the name of the variable is I. So I will write let I equal to 0 instead of the let counter equal to 0. Then we have the same condition as we had in the while loop. In this case, while our counter is less than 5, so I can write I is less than 5. And then what we should do with our counter after each cycle. We should increase the counter by 1, and I will write I plus plus. Now inside of our body, I will add the word darling to our letter. And at the end of this word, I will add a space to increase the readability in the console. Let's log the result to the console. And now you can see that we have 5 times word darling separated by space, and we had the same result with a while loop. So now let's write the falling phase. Again, I will start from the for loop. This might be tricky, but I can again initialize the value I in this for loop. But I think that this might be confusing why we can initialize our variable again. So I think that this is better to change this letter to another one because this topic is beyond this video. So let's just change I to J. And then we should write the condition while our loop should run. So as you see, while our counter changes from 5 to -5, we should add the word love to our letter. So I will write J is more than -5. And we also should change the initial value of J to 5 because we start our falling phase from the counter of 5. And finally, I will write I minus minus because we should decrement our counter after each iteration. Inside of our body, I will write letter plus equal love. Let's look at the result in the console. So I will delete this line after our first for loop and I will add it after our second for loop. And now I have a reference error because I forgot that we have used J in this case and I wrote I minus minus. So we should change this I to J. And now if we look to the console, we see that we have 5 words darling and then a lot of words love. The third challenge is called printing machine. In this challenge, we should ask a user to write 5-letter message using the confirm function. When the user presses OK, we should add the chosen letter to the message, and when the user presses cancel, we should switch the letter to another one. Pause this video to solve this challenge by your own, but instead of the while loop, using for loops. But right now, let's solve this challenge together, and it will be very interesting that the solution will be almost the same. So I might just copy this part that we had in our while loop challenge. And all what I need to change is the keyword while to the keyword for. And then I also should add the first and the third parts of the for loop. But both these parts don't influence the result at all. So I might write whatever I want in our first part and in our third part. So let's also check this in the console. Is it working or not? And now you see that. Please write a message. And then I might add this letter to the message. Or I might switch the letter and add our new letter to the message. And as you see by pressing OK, I wrote the 5-letter message that we see in our console. And the problem of using for loop in this challenge that the for loop is built for specific amount of cycles. These 3 parts that we have in the for loop, they determine the specific amount of cycles. As we had in our first challenge, we knew that we should sum all numbers from 1 to 100, so we knew that if we add a new number to the total every iteration, we should do 100 iterations. And this is the reason why our for loop solution was much simpler than our while loop solution. But the main purpose of while loop is to be used when you don't know the specific amount of cycles. As in this example, we don't know how many cycles user needs to write the 5 letters message because he might switch the letter and basically he might do it infinite amount of time. He might just press cancel and cancel and cancel. For these situations, while loop is much better, is much simpler because it has only the condition while it should run. Master JavaScript for loops with this code challenge. This code challenge is split into 3 parts, so you can attempt each part yourself before watching the solution in this video. This code challenge is built for beginners who are just starting to learn for loops. The first part is called message mixer. You should ask a user to write a message using the prompt function. I will quickly demonstrate how prompt function works. At first, you should connect to the browser using a live server extension. The first message that we see is a confirm function. Confirm function just pop up a message with 2 buttons, OK or cancel. And this function returns true if you press OK and returns false if you press cancel. For example, I press OK and then we have a new message. This pop-up message is generated by prompt function. Here the user can type something. And then if the user presses OK, we will have this message in the JavaScript. And if the user presses cancel, we will have null as a result. So after you got the message from the user, for each character in this message, choose a random 0 or 1. For each 0, you will increment cats by 1. And for each 1, you will increment dogs by 1. Dogs and cats are represented by numbers. To generate a random number, you can use this function. And if you want to know more about random in the JavaScript, I have a video on this topic. Try to solve this part by your own, but right now let's solve it together. The first step in our challenge is to take the message from the user. So I can write the same line to ask a message. And we will store it in the variable user message. Then let's try to write a for loop. I start from the keyword for. Then in the parentheses we have 3 parts. So in the first part I initialize the variable. I is the most common name for the variable in the for loop, and by default we assign the initial value of 0 to the I. In the second part we should determine when our loop should run. We want to iterate through every single character that user wrote in the message, so I can write I is less than user message.length. And in the third part we should increase or decrease our I. In our case we can increase it by 1. Then we need to generate a random 0 or 1. I will start from the variable random number. And then I will write the same function to generate a random 0 or 1. Now I need to increment cats if our random number is equal to 0. And otherwise I need to increment our dogs. So let's initialize cats and dogs. And now we will write a simple if statement. If random number equal to 0, in this case we will increment cats by 1. I used a shorthand ++ to increment cats by 1. And otherwise we will increment dogs by 1. Let's also log the message to the console to see how it works. I wrote 2 console logs, and right now we see a pop-up prompt where we can write something. And when I pressed OK, you see that our word was allocated between 2 variables, cats and dogs. And let's try again. If I just press OK, we have number of cats that is equal to 0 and number of dogs that equals to 0. The second part is called bone distribution. In this challenge, you need to order food for animals. And then in the console, you need to show if there are enough food or not. We assume that all cats have food, but then for each cat, we order a new bone for dog. So the amount of bones will be equal to the amount of cats. And then if number of bones are more or equal to number of dogs, you need to log the message that all animals are happy. And otherwise you will log the message that not enough food. Now you can try solving it on your own, but right now I will show you the solution. Let's start from the new variable bones. And then we'll create a new for loop that will order a new bone for each cat. In the first part, I initialize I. Then I will write that I is less than bones. So we don't need to add a word length to the bones, because in this case, bones are represented by numbers. And in the third part, I will increase I by 1. And now I can just write bones plus plus, because for each cycle I need to add a new bone. And then we will continue beyond this for loop. We will write that if bones are more or equal to dogs, console.log the message that all animals are happy. And in the else statement, we will log the message that not enough food to the console. I also added a new log to the console to see the amount of bones that we have. So let's test it. I will write something like code, so we know that this word contains 4 characters. And then we see that randomly it was distributed between cats and dogs, and we have 1 cat and 3 dogs. So the next message that not enough food is the right message because cats are less than dogs, but then we have the amount of bones that equal to 0, and this is not the right answer because it should be equal to 1. And the problem is that in the for loop we wrote I is less than bones, but bones is equal to 0, so right here should be variable cats. Now if I save the file and write the code again, we see the same situation, but the number of bones is equal to 1, which is the right answer. We can test it again to see that the amount of bones are equal to the amount of cats. I will write a long message. Now you see that we have 8 cats and 8 bones, so all works correctly. The third part is called Hungry Dog Alert, and this is the final and the trickiest part because it depends on the result of the part 2. If in the part 2 you log that all animals are happy, you don't need to add any additional messages. But otherwise, if some dogs are hungry, for each hungry dog you need to add the word more to the message. And after all these cycles, you need to add the word food to the message. So for example, if you have 2 hungry dogs, you will have the message more food. And in this case, I wrote that you will have a variable hungry dogs, but you should think how to calculate it. As always, try it yourself first and then let's solve it together. As I said, it depends on the second part. One of the possible solutions is actually to start writing it inside of the second part. So you have an else statement with a message that not enough food, and inside of this message you can start to solve this challenge. So you can write for loop and initialize hungry dogs and so on. But in this case, I want to show you one trick that you might use if you want to separate these parts. Let's add a new variable enough food with a default value of true. And then in the else part, where we log the message that not enough food, we can set the value for the enough food variable that will be equal to false. And then I will start the third part from the if statement that if enough food equals to false, And here we'll write all the logic for the third part. Also, we have a shorthand for enough food equal to false, which is not logical operator in front of the enough food variable. This if statement is absolutely the same as the previous one, but this is just a shorthand. And now let's start to solve our code challenge. For the for loop, we will need the variable hungry dogs. So how to calculate hungry dogs? So let's assume that I have 10 dogs and 8 bones. To calculate how many dogs are hungry, we need to subtract from the amount of dogs the amount of bones. So let's declare this variable. And we definitely know that hungry dogs are more than 0 because we calculated it in the part 2. So now I can start a new for loop where I will initialize I. Then we need to add the word more for each hungry dog. So I will write I is less than hungry dog. Hungry dogs variable is a number, so I don't need to add .length at the end of this variable. And then I need to increase I by 1. Let's also declare the variable message. And then we'll just add the word more to the message. I also used a shorthand for that. And this shorthand means message equal message plus more. Then we also need to add the word food after all these words more. After our for loop, I will add a new line, message plus equal food. And then we also need to log this message to the console. So let's test how it works. I will write the word code again. And now you see that we have 1 cat and 3 dogs. So we have a message that not enough food. And then we have a message more food because we have only 1 bone. And it means that we have 2 hungry dogs. Let's also try what will be if we press OK. So we see that the amount of cats are 0 and the amount of dogs are 0. All animals are happy because 0 animals need 0 food. Our code examples are becoming more and more complex. Now it's important to learn how to find and fix bugs. In the next video, we will explore debug tools that you can use for error detection.